Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Chris Gio here, coming to you from Beyond the Veil. I wanted to go back and redo a video that I haven't done since 2017, and that is how to make ayahuasca at home. Syrian and I have been developing a recipe for the last 13 years since we started working with ayahuasca, and we've been perfecting that recipe down to a point where we have it almost scientifically perfect. And as long as the bark is in good condition and of good quality, we get consistent brews. So I wanted to do a two-part video. The first part is going to be here on YouTube, and this is just going to explain for anybody new to ayahuasca or considering doing ayahuasca or wanting to do it but don't have the means to go down to the Amazon, or just simply want to start doing it on their own so they can start really getting into the deeper levels of gnosis. I want to talk about the different plants that can be used in order to make an ayahuasca or an ayahuasca analog. I also wanted to talk about some of our brewing techniques where we've actually got it down to where we get some very, very, very powerful brews, very, very, very concentrated, and they taste very good. I mean, they don't taste good. They still have a little bit of a bitter taste, but it's not hard to take them down at all whatsoever. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to go ahead and revisit that and really put the information out there. Now on patreon.com/btvtribe, in just a few in a few days, what we're going to be doing is we're going to actually be brewing ourselves. So we're going to take you into our kitchen. We're going to show you step by step on how to brew. Of course, we can't do that here on Patreon. I mean on YouTube, but at patreon.com/btvtribe, we definitely can do that. So I want to start it out with a toast for you guys and gals, and this was done in the Great Pyramid of Giza. So first of all, a toast of ayahuasca from within the Great Pyramid of Giza before we begin. This is for all of the BTV family out there. We have done something historical today. Love ya. So I will explain what the orange is for as we move through the broadcast, but you know what? We're going to do two parts in this particular video. I'm going to try to go through all the plants. I'm going to try to go through everything first. Then we're probably going to wind up cutting it, and then I'll take some questions out of the chat room, maybe take some calls if you have some questions about brewing techniques that you're doing at home, or if you just have any questions in general, I'll be more than happy to go over them. But let's get into it.
The sky so far away tonight, but I can't lose this one. Get a pride of a falling night. Thought that I was fit to fight for us to be. You gave me life for loving me. Tell me, where did we go so wrong?
Raw consciousness does not require a savior, but rather, raw consciousness requires only knowledge of oneself and the power to access it. Remember this, as we unlock an even greater gnosis from beyond the veil.
From the fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm Chris Gio, and I will be taking you beyond the veil this evening. Hopefully, this video, just like the other video that I did in 2017, how to make ayahuasca, is going to go far and wide. And so hopefully we'll bring a lot of new people here to the channel. If you're new to the channel and checking out this archive, definitely go through our archives. We have some interesting experiences and some interesting gnosis to share share with each and every one of you. But the primary focus of this video is just to go back and do kind of a step-by-step guide on how to make ayahuasca at home. We have a guide called the Giawaska Guide, and I will leave an email address in the description of this video. If you send an email to that email address, it will automatically send you a link back to the Giawaska Guide. We call it Giawaska because we put our own little different spin on it, but I'll tell you what the traditional ayahuasca is made out of, how to make that, and also how to make the Giawaska brand of ayahuasca, which would be considered more of an analog, but it's more of an Egyptian style way of doing ayahuasca, which includes like Syrian rue, which is something the Bedouin down in Egypt still use to this day for their rituals. The Bedouin are more like Native Americans down in Egypt, so they're the natives, the true natives of Egypt. So before I begin, I want to just highlight the importance of understanding your own consciousness out there, because if you are having issues with your own consciousness, you probably don't want to do ayahuasca by yourself. However, I am very apprehensive about going down to the Amazon, drinking somebody else's brew, and not knowing what's in it. And I've heard a lot of stories, some great stories of people going down to the Amazon and having a wonderful experience, other stories of people going down there and having a bad experience. Now, what I did is on my own, I learned how to brew it, and I started way back in 2008, but I wasn't very successful in brewing the ayahuasca, so I started working with DMT. Then in 2010, Joe Rogan came on the show, and we had a 3-hour conversation, and Joe said something that really stuck with me. He said, "Chris, why do you want to go down to the Amazon and get bit by a bunch of bugs? Why don't you just make it yourself?" And that prompted me to really understand how to make ayahuasca at home and how to do it by myself, rather than going down to the Amazon. And what I like about this method, and I coined hashtag become your own shaman as a result, is that you get to work one-on-one with the plants. You don't have an outside influencer. You don't have anybody leading the ceremony. You don't have anybody leading the ritual. As far as a playlist goes, in the Giawaska Guide, we do have our initial playlist that we used way back in the day. The playlist has started to evolve, but this particular playlist is a lot of Native American type stuff, very spiritual stuff, even though we kind of went into a little more like side chill, more electronic type stuff as the journey progressed. But you can use that playlist. But I would recommend putting together your own playlist, because the music is the backbone of the experience, and it's whatever vibes with your soul. Now, there's some dogma out there that you should never do ayahuasca by yourself. It should always be done with a shaman and, all this stuff. And for some people, that very well might be true. And like I said, you have to be the judge of whether you are ready to handle this or not. But in my humble opinion, if you are a psychonaut in any way, if you've experimented with LSD, magic mushrooms, things like that, if you know what it's like to step outside of your body, you can take ayahuasca and have a great experience with it, especially when you're with a loved one, when you're with your wife or your husband or your brother or your sister, because it's all about set and setting. So the set is the area that you're in, and the setting, or the setting is the area that you're in, and the set is the mindset that you're in at the same time. And if you have a brother or a sister or a spouse or a best friend that you trust, you're going to have a much better experience, in my humble opinion, than if you're around a bunch of strangers that you don't trust, especially for some of the ladies out there that are going down to ayahuasca ceremonies, because ayahuasca puts you in a state where you're very vulnerable. And while there are many, many, many shaman who are noble, there are some shaman who are not noble. And I've seen this both here in the States and down in the Amazon. And I've seen and read about stories of women being taken advantage of. My rule of thumb is this: if I give somebody ayahuasca, then I do not have any kind of sexual energy exchange with them whatsoever. I always make a joke, I can be your playmate or I can be your shaman, but I cannot be both. So we can party or I can help you with your spirituality, but we can't be both, because in my opinion, that violates a very, very, very sacred space. So that is, in my opinion, the foundation of hashtag become your own shaman. So you can learn from the plants instead of having somebody else's experience. So we embarked upon this journey, and over the course of time, we developed some techniques, and we found some plants that work, and we found some plants that don't. So I wanted to go over some of the plants with you first and foremost. And first of all, I guess for the sake of inclusion for people that aren't aware of what ayahuasca is, if you're not aware, then you probably shouldn't be brewing it at home. I often make a joke. People always ask me, how do I make ayahuasca, and they don't know how to spell it. And I say, well, first thing is to learn how to spell it first, because education, in my opinion, is key to all of this. You really need to understand what you're doing in order to, number one, have a successful experience, but number two, get the most out of your experiences. And what's beautiful about this is you can make ayahuasca for as little as like $3 or $4, so per dose. So instead of spending $2,000 and going down to the Amazon, you can spend $2 or $3 and make it at home, have a wonderful experience around people in an environment that is good for you, that you're comfortable in. Or you can go out camping, you can go out to the wilderness. We used to live out on a lake, so it was beautiful. We used to be able to get on the boat and go do ayahuasca in the middle of the lake. You can see the Milky Way. But right now we're in Las Vegas. However, we can go down into the desert, camp out, and have ayahuasca experiences there, and they're just as magical, just as beautiful. Now, there is something to say about the beauty of the rainforest, though, and the energy of the rainforest. So again, I don't want anybody to think that I'm discounting any of those experiences, but what I want to do is I want to empower people with the tools so they can become their own shaman. Because as I learned with a shaman myself and with the plants, I learned that as I became a quote-unquote shaman, number one, a shaman is somebody who is recognized by others as such. It's not somebody that wears it as a title. So I veer away from people who use the term shaman as a title, and I really look for those people that I hear other people referring to as a shaman. And then number two, when you take the experience in your own hand, the plants teach you how to heal yourself. And as I worked with my shaman, that William Whitecrow, he never really taught me anything except for how to teach myself, how to unlock the gnosis for myself, how to develop my own rituals, how to develop my own way of doing things. And so while I recognize that there are traditions that are passed down, in my opinion, the most powerful rituals are the ones that you develop on your own. That goes for magic spells, that goes for ayahuasca, that goes for meditation, that goes for anything like that. It's great to be inspired by other people, but we're each individual consciousness, and so therefore we're going to have individual paths. And this isn't a message that I hear being spoken about a lot. And as a matter of fact, I see a lot of articles that are written by ayahuasca retreats saying, don't make ayahuasca by yourself under any circumstances. And it's usually Americans that have gone down to the Amazon to create an ayahuasca retreat. Now, I saw an interesting documentary about a guy who was trying to find true ayahuasca. And he went to a couple of retreats, found out they were quote-unquote gringo retreats. He took a 2-week trek down the Amazonian River on a boat, still couldn't find genuine ayahuasca from a tribe that's in the Amazon. He wound up doing combo or something like that. It's that frog venom. And the documentary ended like that, which was, you're not really going to find the true ayahuasca that you would think of. But some of the accommodations down in the Amazon are great. But the accommodations in your own space, in my opinion, is even greater. So I don't agree with the whole idea that you have to be a trained shaman to use these tools, because these are tools that come from earth, and we all have it inside of us to be able to utilize these tools. But there are a couple of things you have to be aware of first and foremost. Number one, you have to be very, very, very strict if you're on any kind of medications, SSRIs, to be specific. I have heard of people using ayahuasca on benzos before, on opioids before, several other things, and not having any interactions. But there's something called serotonin syndrome that can happen when you're on SSRIs. And this SSRIs can actually be fatal when mixed in with one of these plants that I'm going to talk about, which is an MAOI, which basically inhibits the stomach acids inside of the stomach in order to make the DMT active. If you are on SSRIs and you want to travel to hyperspace, I would recommend extracting DMT and smoking it, because you don't have to worry about the MAOI interference. However, any kind of psychopharmaceuticals, whether they're benzos, which are, I don't recommend that anybody does benzos with ayahuasca, but it's not as important as SSRIs. Staying off of SSRIs. And the thing is, with SSRIs, you can't just quit just overnight. You have to taper yourself off, then you have to let your brain reset. So let me just say this for the sake of safety. If you're on SSRIs, just please do not think about making ayahuasca. The rest, use your own discernment. But what I found with benzos is at the very beginning, when we were smoking DMT, I was trying to take care of what is referred to as pre-flight jitters, especially for very early psychonauts, people that haven't done it very much. And even though I had a lot of experience with LSD, magic mushrooms, things like that, DMT in its smoked form blasts you off into hyperspace so fast that everybody, even to this day, I still get the pre-flight jitters before I smoke some DMT. And I really don't like DMT as much, because it happens so quickly and it's so condensed. By the time you realize, hey, wait a minute, I'm in the DMT space, then you're already back. So you don't have the opportunity to really soak in the gnosis. An ayahuasca experience, when done at proper doses, like the Giawaska doses, can be very similar to a DMT experience, except everything is going much slower. So you have time to process everything. However, there was one time when I tried to combat the pre-flight jitters before smoking DMT. I was experimenting with several different things. Cannabis made me feel wacky before smoking DMT. So I tried cannabis a couple times to calm me down a little bit. One time I tried benzos. I tried a Xanax before smoking DMT. What that resulted in is the visions looking black and white. Now, I don't know if this happens with everybody, but I know that benzos will dull the experience. So if you're on benzos, it's not that important to get off of them, but it would be a good idea to make a little bit of separation, but you might not have as powerful an experience because of that. However, benzos are another thing that you don't want to just quit overnight, because you can actually go into a fatal withdrawal where if you stop taking it, all of a sudden you can go into seizures and convulsions and many other things like that. Opioids, on the other hand, you can quit those. You're going to probably feel like shit for about 4 or 5 days. After that, they're pretty much out of your system. And if you want to go that route, I definitely recommend, if you're on opioids, to put a little bit of separation between journeying into the ayahuasca realm. So if you're on any kind of medications, in my opinion, the safest way to travel is with magic mushrooms or with DMT, straight DMT, because you're not introducing an MAOI into it. An MAOI, there's a lot of dogma when it comes to diet. And while I find a lot of value, especially for people at the very beginning, to follow the diet, stay away from fermented cheeses, stay away from meat, stay away from alcohol, stay away from things like that. What I found through my experiences is that the ayahuasca doesn't really care what you've eaten. It's still going to show you whatever it is that it needs to show you. So interactions with foods, I think, are more dogma. However, you do purge when you take ayahuasca. And what you're doing is the purge is actually a beautiful, wonderful experience, because usually the purge will come on either right after you've drank it, which is why it's important to make several doses, as I'll talk about here in just a few minutes, or it will come on as you start to go into the experience and as you start processing. Maybe you're processing some traumas. Maybe you're processing some things that are really intense inside of you. And it's not a scary experience at all. Actually, it's a very loving experience. She wraps her arms around you. She embraces you. She takes you gently through the experience, and she's not going to take you any further than you want to go. That you're ready to go, I should say. So the first few experiences might be blissful. They might be beautiful. They might be wonderful. But at some point, you're going to say, I want some healing out of this. And when you want some healing, that's when you're going to start facing your traumas. But that's when the purge comes in the best. Because number one, the DMT puts you in a euphoric state. But number two, when you're processing all this negative energy that's inside of you, whether it be from traumas or astral parasites or anything like that you've picked up, when you purge it all out physically, it's not only you're not only purging things out physically, but you're also purging out all of that negative energy. And it's the greatest feeling. You wouldn't think that throwing up would feel good, but because of the euphoria that DMT creates and the release of all of that negativity that's inside of you from whatever you're dealing with, I've purged and I look like I'm in agony, and I'll look up at my wife and go, oh my God, I feel better than I have felt in a long time by being able to release all of that. So a lot of people are apprehensive of the purge, but I think the purge, in my opinion, is a very powerful part of the experience, and it's not nearly as unpleasant as you would think that it is. And I got to tell you, in 13 years and hundreds of ayahuasca experiences, I have never once missed the bucket. I could be deep in hyperspace on a massive dose, and it's almost like the body just like takes over. It's like on autopilot. I remember one experience. I was just sitting there on the couch, and I was like, no, I'm not going to purge. I don't think I'm going to purge. And then all of a sudden, I got to purge, and my body just immediately went straight for the bucket, grabbed the bucket, and boom, let it all go as soon as it made contact with the bucket. So you don't have to worry about any of that. But that's why it's good to have somebody there that you can trust. A brother, a sister, a sibling. I just said brother and sister. A spouse, somebody like that. Or, a shaman that you can trust as well. But it's so much more intimate when it's with one of your loved ones. I only drink ayahuasca with my wife, and it's a very, very, very intimate experiences. So the MAOI can come in a couple of different forms. Down in the Amazon, they use something called bee cappy, and I'll put that here on the screen here. So bee cappy is the primary plant. This is the healer. This is actually what is referred to as the ayahuasca vine. Now, the DMT-containing plant, which is a second plant, so you have two plants basically in the ayahuasca brew. You have your MAOI and you have your DMT-containing plant. The MAOI, as I said, neutralizes the stomach acids. The DMT-containing plant then makes divisions. So without the MAOI, if you drink some ayahuasca that doesn't have an MAOI in it, your stomach is just going to dissolve all the DMT, which is why a lot of people prefer to smoke it if they want to skip the MAOI step. Or if you want to take an MAOI before you smoke DMT, that's a whole nother experience. And MAOIs also help before you take mushrooms too. They will really make a mushroom trip a whole lot more intense with an MAOI introduced first. But there are a couple of different kinds of bee cappy plants out there. And here in the States and in other places like that, of course, we have to order them. Now, none of the ingredients are illegal. However, mixing them all together is illegal. So I don't recommend that anybody actually does this. This is all theoretical. But usually you'll get some bark that, looks something like this. I prefer to use shredded bark for everything. And the reason that I prefer to use shredded bark is because it's much easier to handle and to remove out of the water, so you can get all the sediment and everything like that out of there. And so the brewing techniques that we use for the Bikapi are the same that we use for any other plant that we choose to use in our ayahuasca brews. But the traditional is the Bikapi. Now, when people go looking for Bikapi, they come across a couple different cappies. They come across white cappy, they come across red cappy, yellow cappy, and black cappy. Actually, the order is white, yellow, red, black. They all do the same thing. However, they have harmines and harmalines inside of them. The darker the cappy, the heavier it is on your stomach, and the more likely it is that you're going to purge and purge hard. I remember Terrence McKenna saying something to the effect that he prefers the red cappy. I prefer the white cappy if I'm using cappy at all, period, because I don't like to have nausea and things like that going on when I'm focusing on the ayahuasca. Down in the Amazon, what they'll do is they will actually mix it all together in one large pot. So I will pull up a picture of this, and they'll go out and they will harvest the Bikapi at a particular time of day. It depends on that particular time of day, the potency of the Bikapi, and also the other plant that I'm about to talk about right now, which is called the chacruna plant. So let me put that back on the screen here so you can see this. This is what a traditional ayahuasca brew looks like in the Amazon. They don't really break it up too much. All these leaves are the chacruna leaves, which this is the chacruna plant right here. And this also can be ordered, and usually when you order it, you would get it in something that looks, kind of like this. Let's see, herbal tea, organic tea. I don't know if that's actually chacruna or not. It's just coming up under chacruna. But, you would usually get it in a shredded or dried state. Maybe something a little closer to this. So it would be something closer to this, where in the Amazon, you can see how beneficial it is to be able to actually go out and cut the plants down yourself. And sometimes at some retreats, they will take you with a machete, and you will go and you will cut your own ayahuasca and ayahuasca vine and chacruna down, and actually use that on that during that ceremony. However, the problem that I find with using the combination of Bikapi and chacruna are actually two different problems, especially when you're making it home, because both plants vary in potency depending on when they're harvested. And chacruna itself has about 0.3% DMT in it. So in order to get a really good dose of chacruna, you have to use a lot more plant matter, which means, number one, it's going to be a lot more expensive. But number two, you don't even know if that chacruna actually has that 0.3, or if it has 0.1, or if it doesn't have any DMT in it at all, because it was picked at the wrong time. In my 13 years of experience, I have never met anybody that has had a successful ayahuasca experience using the combination of Bikapi and chacruna here in the States. In the Amazon, they can just take a ton of it, put it in a pot, let it boil, and then let you drink that. However, we've had people like Dennis McKenna on our show before, and Dennis said that the average dose down there of ayahuasca has about 10 to 15 milligrams of DMT in it, which is a very, very, very low dose. It's a very low threshold dose that might make you feel, a little good, but it's not really going to take you into that ayahuasca healing state. So while you can do that, that's not the way that I like to do it. I also find another big problem with the way they brew down in the Amazon, because they're usually taking both plants and they're brewing them together. And I find this problematic because you need about 20 minutes for whatever MAOI you're working with to start working within the stomach before before the stomach acids are neutralized enough to start absorbing the DMT. So you drink a dose of ayahuasca that's mixed with both the chacruna and the Be Happy. You're still in that process of waiting for those stomach acids to be neutralized. So the DMT that you're drinking is just being wasted and your body's not processing it, which is usually why you need 2-3 doses, as you go. And even with the Giawaska style of ayahuasca, I always recommend to make at least 4 doses per person. And I'll get into the reasons why, but I'll just give them to you real quick. 1 dose to start with. And if you puke that up in 10 minutes, if you can't hold it down for some reason, you have another dose that you can take. If you puke that one up, you have another dose you can take. Or if you don't puke that one up, you can redose a little bit later in the evening, and then you have an extra dose too if you want to redose again. And so, that's part of the system that we've developed with our own brand of the ayahuasca. But we take the MAOI separate from the DMT-containing plant. And if we're using Be Happy, what we'll do is we'll use the same extraction method that we do with all of our other plants that I'll get into here in a little bit, but we make them separate. We drink the Be Happy first, then about 10, 15, 20 minutes later, then we'll drink the DMT-containing brew, and that maximizes the amount of DMT that your body is absorbing. And you'll start to feel it. Whenever you take an MAOI, it'll make you feel warm and fuzzy. And so when you start to feel that warm and fuzzy feeling to you, then you know that your stomach acids are neutralized. Then you can introduce the DMT brew, and you will get much, much more out of your DMT experiences by doing it that way. And I would love to go down to the Amazon, see how they're brewing, and recommend to the shaman down there, hey, try breaking this up, and you'll probably get a much, much, much better experience. But realistically, when you look at the amount of plant matter that they're using, they have an unlimited supply. So they don't have to worry about ordering a small amount, brewing it, and then it not working. Because it usually will work if you throw enough plant matter in there. But the worst thing, in my opinion, is when you go through all the process of making it, which you can make it anywhere from 9 hours to 48 hours or 72 hours. I like to take more like 48 to 72 hours to brew, and I'll explain to you why. But in short, it's to make sure that I can get the most powerful, most concentrated, and least bitter and easiest to take down. And that comes in through the filtering process that I like to do personally. But I'd like to go down there and show them my version of ayahuasca and see what they think. So the next plant on the list here that I have is also an MAOI, and this is where you get into the territory of an ayahuasca analog. But in my opinion, as you can see from my appearance, my background, everything like that, I'm very Egyptian spirited, and the Egyptians use Syrian rue seeds. The Bedouin will do Syrian rue rituals where they will light the Syrian rue and then breathe the Syrian rue in. So my go-to is Syrian rue. And I find a couple of problems with Be Happy, because with Be Happy, number one, like I said, the worst thing is to prepare for a ceremony, do all your brewing, do everything like that, and then realize, oh, my Cappy's not working, or oh, I didn't do my DMT brew right. And, we've had many nights like that where we've put in all this work and it just didn't work, which is why we got it down to a science. But Be Happy, it acts more like a cocoon. So I like to add a little bit of Be Happy in it, but I don't rely on the Be Happy to create the MAOI effect. What I prefer is to use Syrian rue seeds. Syrian rue seeds are very abundant. They cost next to nothing. I think you can get you can get a big bag like this for $5 or $10 or something like that. But they usually come looking like this. And what you need about 3 grams per person. The thing about Syrian rue is the more you take, it's not necessarily going to make the experience any better, but rather all it's going to do is just add to the nausea. So my goal whenever taking Syrian rue is to hit that threshold where the MAOI is starting to work. I'm feeling it in my stomach. I'm feeling the warm and fuzziness, but I'm also avoiding the nausea as much as possible. So, 2.5 grams, 3 grams, 3.5 grams, depending on how big you are. But the key here, that it took me a couple of, several failed ayahuasca experiences to realize is the key is to grind them up in a coffee grinder. Because if you just take the seeds by themselves, they're not going to work. And the first several experiences I was doing, I was taking the seeds, then drinking my brew and thinking, this isn't working. This isn't going anywhere. All it's doing is just making me sick. It's making me feel like I want to throw up, and that's it. But I'm not having any visions. I'm not going anywhere. It was because I wasn't grinding them up. You can use the same extraction method that I'll talk about here a little bit later in the broadcast after I introduce all the plants. You can actually make a Syrian rue tea out of the Syrian rue. But in my opinion, when it comes to the MAOI, I don't like to take any chances whatsoever. So what I'll usually do is I'll grind up about 3 grams of the Syrian rue, and I'll put them in little capsules. Those little capsules that you put like vitamins and things like that in. And you usually have to eat like 7, 8, 9 capsules. So it's a lot of capsules that you're drinking. But when you put them in those little capsules, you don't taste it at all. So you get an opportunity to just drink it and give it a little bit of time to work. So what we'll do is we'll usually start the night out by saging the room, by getting our capsules ready. We'll eat our capsules, maybe go take a shower after that if we haven't showered. I like to take a shower after I eat my Syrian rue because I'm getting into that space now. I'm getting ready to go in there. I'm cleansing myself with water. And really, putting myself in the right mindset while at the same time playing beautiful music in the background and keeping the energies and frequencies really, really, really high. And at the risk of getting ahead of myself, the ayahuasca brew really picks up a lot of energy. So if you have negative energy in the house while you're brewing, if you're taking 48 hours, 72 hours, and you have negative energy in the house, if you're arguing with your spouse, if you're doing any of that, the ayahuasca brew is going to pick up that energy. So it's very, very important to keep a clear energetic space. As a matter of fact, one time Sheree and I were brewing and we started arguing really bad over something ridiculous. The brew, for the first time, actually started to mold. We found mold in the brew. Now, we had turned it off and left it overnight, but we always turn it off and leave it overnight and come back the next day. We found mold in the brew. It was absorbing that much negative energy. We wound up throwing it out. But we also had other situations where we would get into an argument about something, stupid little things that married couples get into arguments about. And then we just say, you know what? We have to dump out the brew, and we'll go outside and reluctantly, pour it out because we want to stay in a positive frequency with a very clear space whenever we're working with these plants to keep them energetically sound. And as we're brewing them too, we do certain incantations, our own incantations. It's nothing written in a book. It's nothing like that. We revere the Egyptian deities, but if you're new to the channel, we don't see the deities as external beings. Rather, we see the deities as internal beings. But we revere Isis, the goddess Isis, for example. We always invoke Isis into the brew to bring the divine feminine, loving, motherly energy as we're saging. And Sheree does a lot of the saging because I just feel like that female energy, it adds so much. And if you're lucky enough to have a wife or sister or a female there to do the blessings for you, I find that injects a lot more loving feminine energy. The Be Happy, though, the Be Happy in conjunction with the Syrian rue, acts more like a cocoon. So it's more of a loving embrace. It's a warm embrace, where the Syrian rue, without the cappy, is actually a little bit more outwards rather than inwards, if that makes any sense. You know, the cappy is more like a cocoon. It's like being wrapped in mother's arms. Whereas when you go a little bit into the next levels, and start using just strictly Syrian rue and something else, I'll introduce more plants, then you start going outwards. That's the best way that I can explain it. However, to continue with what I was discussing, so we went over the MAOIs. Now, as I said, the chacruna is the traditional ayahuasca brew out there. It contains 0.3% DMT. What I prefer, and it's much easier to get because it's actually native to the United States and Hawaii, it also comes from Taiwan as well, is a plant called Acacia confucia. Acacia confucia contains 1% DMT, as opposed to the chacruna, which contains 0.1 to 0.3% DMT. The Acacia confucia is pretty spot on between 0.75 and 1% DMT. So that means that you can really start to measure this out and know what you're going to get, and you don't have to use nearly as much plant matter in order to have wonderful, wonderful experiences. The Acacia confucia also has another very interesting component to it that's called NMT. So not only does it have 1% DMT, but it has 1% NMT as well. And we're still trying to figure out what NMT is. We've spoken to Dennis McKenna about it. We've spoken to Rick Strassman about it. We've spoken to, the guy that made DMT, the spirit molecule. I don't know why I can't remember his name. Mitch Schultz. We've spoken to Mitch Schultz about it in the past. If you go back to tfrlive.com/beyond the veil, which TFR Live is up on our the top right of the screen, tfrlive.com/beyond the veil. We have a lot of shows there with a lot of interviews that we don't have here on YouTube. So we have a lot of information going back, all the way to 2009. But everybody is interested in NMT. What is NMT? NMT seems to have a more feminine energy to it. It's a more motherly energy. But unlike the cocoon of the bee cappy, it brings the feminine energy in. But at the same time, and by feminine, I just want to be clear, just for anybody that's new to the channel, when I say feminine and masculine, I'm not referring to gender or gender roles. Rather, I'm referring to consciousness. I'm referring to the masculine as the logical processor, as the warrior, and the feminine as the nurturer and the healer and the compassion and love and empathy. So when I say it brings more feminine energy, it brings more compassion, love, and empathy. And there's something about the NMT that really helps you to commune with the divine feminine goddesses or divine feminine energies. And it just seems to be more of a caring, a much more caring and compassionate experience that you have, much more loving. I'm going to introduce one more plant here in just a moment. But with the Acacia confucia, what you want is you want the bark. You don't want the plant itself. You want the bark, very similar to this here. This is a Hawaiian Acacia confucia bark, and you can see how red and pink it is on the inside. In my opinion, I prefer Taiwanese. For some reason, I don't know why. I have better experiences with Taiwanese, but there are plenty places online that you can order these plants. I am reluctant to plug any of the places where you can buy these plants, just simply because I don't want to, number one, put out a recipe and also tell people where to get the components, because I just feel like legally that might be a gray area that I don't want to step into. So forgive me for not pointing you to where to get the plants, but do some diligent research if you are interested in doing ayahuasca at home, because that's what it's all about. It's about education. It's about research. It's about all of that. You've got to have the knowledge for yourself, and doing the research for yourself, even just watching this video, is the first step. And the second step is finding sources and things like that. So what I prefer with any kind of bark, whether it's Acacia confusia or the next bark that I'm about to introduce, is I prefer it shredded. And like I said, the reason that I prefer to use it shredded is because it's much easier to take out of the water when it's time to extract it, and we get to the extraction process that I'm going to get into here in just a few moments. Now, my absolute favorite, go-to. It's become harder and harder and harder to get, and it's become more expensive as well because it is harder to get. It's technically not illegal. However, they have been stopping shipments of this at the border under the guise that it contains DMT, even though it's a plant that is used for dyeing blue jeans. Blue jean dyers still use it to this day to dye blue jeans. So they've kind of laxed that, but it's kind of been going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. The good thing about Acacia confusia is you can order it from people in Hawaii, and so it doesn't cross international borders. Mimosa hostilis, on the other hand, this usually comes from South America, as does the chacruna. The Mimosa hostilis, this is my go-to. This contains up to 2% DMT. So it is, in my opinion, the most powerful DMT-containing plant to use in an ayahuasca brew. And it's also the best, in my humble opinion, for extracting DMT itself. The techniques for extracting DMT from mimosa are so much easier than extracting from Acacia confusia. And I've seen some techniques of people trying to use, or I've seen some instances of people trying to use the techniques for extracting the DMT out of the Acacia confusia where it totally fails because it's not compatible. But Mimosa hostilis, 2% DMT. And as you can see here, the shredded bark, even when I'm doing my extractions, is what I prefer, because it's so much easier to use. You can get it powdered, and if you get it powdered, the problem is it's going to be very hard to filter out. So your brew is going to be left with a lot of different sediment and things like that. The shredded is already hard enough to get out as is. But the powder, forget about it. However, the powder does extract a lot better. So when I have gotten powder, because that's the only thing that I can get, I have found that, okay, it is a lot harder to drink. I throw it up a lot more. It's a lot harder to get out. It's a lot harder to filter out, but I do have more powerful experiences when I'm using powdered bark, but I prefer shredded. So there's a couple different ways you can go about this. As I said, you can, and my preferred method is to rely on the Syrian rue seeds first and foremost for the MAOI effect. Then, if you want to have the traditional ayahuasca experience here in the States or anywhere else in the world without having, at home, let me just say at home, without having to travel to the Amazon, you can then brew some Be Happy and drink the Be Happy along with it. This way, you know for sure that the MAOI is working. You're also getting the healing benefits of the Be Happy. And as I said, the Be Happy is what's called the healer plant in the Amazon. Now, when I first heard about this, I thought the DMT-containing plant would be the healer plant, and the Be Happy would be the helper plant. But that's really not the case. The Be Happy is, they consider that the healer, and they consider the DMT-containing plant the helper. Because what this is on the surface, it's an anti-parasitic, but it is what contains the spirit of the ayahuasca. And so the DMT plant is actually helping the mother plant, which is the Be Happy, by healing you, but it's giving you a visual representation of the healing that you're going through. Now, like I said, sometimes What you might need is just a blissful experience, and that's what might you get. That's what you might get in your first experience, or second experience, or third experience. Also, depending on frequency, if you're with your wife and y'all are taking it, and y'all are looking into each other's eyes, and you're seeing to each other's souls, I don't think all your traumas and all your BS is going to come up. Now, if you've had a relationship that's a little bit shaky, and you drink some ayahuasca together and start looking into each other's souls, those thoughts of, oh my God, how can I treat this person like this? I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I did this. You'll start sobbing with each other, apologizing to each other, telling each other how much you love each other, really seeing the essence of the person that you love. And this is why, in my opinion, it's so much more powerful with a spouse. It's so much more powerful with a sibling. It's so much more powerful with a best friend rather than some stranger that you don't know, because there's a lot more to it than just the internal selfish experience. There's the experience of the other person that you're doing it with, or even if you're doing it by yourself and the other person is just acting as a sitter. Especially if it's somebody intimate in your life, you get so many different revelations about how you are. You get to see through their eyes. You get to see through their perspective, how your actions are affecting them. And sometimes traumas will come up, and you'll have to deal with traumas and, things like that. But it's always a beautiful experience. It's never a horrifying experience. The only time it's a horrifying experience is if you fight the experience. Because what's happening during the ayahuasca state is that your ego is being deprogrammed. Your ego is dying. And that's why, going all the way back to what I was saying before, that's why we get the pre-flight jitters before we do an ayahuasca ceremony or before we do a DMT. Some people might get it before they do mushrooms, because that ego knows it's about to be swatted like a fly. Now, it doesn't mean that ego is bad, not by any means. We hear a lot about ego death and things like that, and I've come to realize through my vast experience that ego is a very important part of self. However, a toxic ego is what you are ultimately trying to remove. You're trying to remove the toxic elements out of your ego and come to your true self. What I refer to it as raw consciousness, your raw, unprogrammed consciousness. Before you went through your traumas, before you went through all of the stuff that you went through, and recognizing those behavioral patterns that you may have adopted when you were a child that are still tethered to you. So I'll share a couple of quick experiences. Our BTV tribe has probably heard this before, but I had an experience where I needed to face some traumas that I had forgotten about. These are memories that were locked away that I didn't remember. And they appeared to me as 3 boxes. And I opened up one box and I saw what was inside. Some childhood abuse that I had forgotten about. And I saw a tether that was tied to my ankle. And looking at this tether, I realized that I was able to start connecting dots and going, oh, so these behavioral patterns that I have exhibited in not only the relationship with Cherie, but all my relationships are all tethered to this experience I had when I was 3 years old that I didn't even remember. But that experience stuck with me and it tethered to my leg. So not only was I able to see it, because the DMT helped me to visualize it, but I was able to cut that tether too. However, if you refuse to face down the darkness, if you refuse to face down your traumas, what will happen, as I've seen in many cases before, is people will start to encounter what they call demons. And I've read articles about, I drank ayahuasca and I was in the biggest hell that I've ever been in my life. And that, in my opinion, is a result of either A, a really bad person coming to terms with themselves that they're a really bad person, or B, if they're constantly seeing quote-unquote demons or being attacked by demons or something like that. What that is, it's the ego, it's the programming, it's the traumas, it's the ayahuasca manifesting something scary in front of you. because it's something that you need to face down, and you're refusing to face it down, so you automatically identify it as something negative rather as something negative that you need to face down. But these are the later stages. Don't worry. Like I said, the ayahuasca is only going to take you as far as you're ready to go. I didn't start having these really, really, really deep experiences until about 1 or 2 years into it, when I asked myself. I didn't ask, I proclaimed, I want deeper experiences. The kitties always have to be here, especially when there's ayahuasca talk. But I proclaimed that. But at first, it was all love and light and bliss and everything like that, and bonding with Cherie. You know, I remember the first time that we smoked DMT together, we saw each other as twin flames, and we were merging with each other, and we saw each other's consciousness just all merged into one, and it was a beautiful, wonderful experience. And we wound up smoking DMT for like a month, like every 2 or 3 days, just bonding, getting to know each other, remembering each other. It was like this grand reunion of twin souls that have finally reunited again after a certain period of time, space, and in a completely and totally new incarnation. But it was at a point when I said I want more, that the ayahuasca gave me more. But you don't have to worry. There's a lot of rumors out there that you're going to drink ayahuasca and all of a sudden just be shot off into hell and start facing all your traumas. If you're not ready to face your traumas, the ayahuasca is not going to force you to. But if you continue to use the ayahuasca and you continue to refuse to go into those next levels, then I have heard of many cases of people being quote unquote attacked by demons and all kinds of things like that. The fact of the matter is, though, that you can't be attacked in the ayahuasca realm. That's ridiculous. It's scary visions that you're seeing coming at you. But I remember one experience when I saw these 2 portals open up, and one had these like demonic looking faces in them, and the other one had nothing at all. And I stared down the demonic looking ones, and I started to understand who I was, and I remember looking at it, and I remember just chuckling. This chuckling came over me like, I'm not afraid of you. You're part of my experience. I'm having this experience. I'm the master of this experience. What, you're going to scare me with what? You think you can scare me by making some scary faces? Come on. No way. You think that's scary? Oh, look at you. Oh, you have horns. Oh, you're sticking your tongue out at me. Oh, you're going blah. Oh, how cute you are. It disappeared. And on the other side was some major, major, major gnosis. So that's the first part of the ayahuasca, gnosis that I wanted to leave you with here, about making ayahuasca at home. And like I said, if you want to get the Giawaska guide, feel free to send an email to the email address that's down at the bottom. On the other side, I want to get into the actual brewing process itself, because that's important. That won't take nearly as long as all of this. Now, before I do, though, I know there's a lot of people out there who are apprehensive about psychedelic experiences and about just altering their consciousness at all, period, for one reason or another. And in the ayahuasca experience, we had a problem that we were dealing with. Cherie has chronic pain. She has a condition called EDS, which is very, 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 very painful to deal with. And she was taking NSAIDs and all kinds of things like that, so much so that it damaged her kidneys. And the last time they gave her a shot of NSAIDs, they did a urine analysis afterwards, and they rushed her to the ER to have it flushed. And there was no more NSAIDs use after that. But I was looking for a way to help her with her chronic pain issues, with her inflammation, a way to bring people back to balance without sending them off into hyperspace. And we were even in a situation where she couldn't test positive for THC. So in hyperspace, I came back with a recipe for a product that most of our BTV tribe have heard about, but if you're new to the channel, you probably haven't heard about it. It is called Ayalife, AYA life.com. What we've done is we extract the cannabis plant, the CBD only, the full spectrum of CBD, and we also extract the bee cappy. Now we put a small amount of bee cappy in there, so you don't have to worry about any interactions with SSRIs or any kind of medication or anything like that. But in Silicon Valley right now and several other places, microdosing is huge. People are microdosing mushrooms, they're microdosing DMT, they're microdosing everything. So what we noticed is that when we combined the 99% pure CBD with the ayahuasca vine itself and a couple of other things, it had this synergetic effect that we are getting reviews like I never expected. I thought it was just to help Cherie, and it's helped her so much on her journey. But the Ayalife, the biggest thing that I hated about CBD oil is the way that it tasted. Like I would never take CBD oil because it tasted like dirt. And I'm like, I'm not going to take this. But it's the same with the ayahuasca. You know, the ayahuasca, I wasn't doing the ayahuasca as much as I wanted to because it tasted so bad. But I learned ways to make it taste good. I learned ways to filter it out and get all that gunk and all that sediment and all that stuff out. Likewise with the Ayalife, we did the same thing. So when you take it, it actually tastes good. Cherie's pain management doctor started to, we gave her a couple of bottles. She gave it to her husband and then started actually taking the flyers from Ayalife and handing them out to her patients because she was saying, use this instead of NSAIDs. My dentist is using it for, the dental assistant has COPD. And she said, I thought there was no cure for this, but I'm sleeping better than I've ever slept before. We also found out that the zombie virus, which is what we call it here on the show because of YouTube censorship, the CVD, the big thing in 2020 that locked down the whole world, people were dying of what is called cytokine storms. And that's when the body starts to, the immune system starts to attack itself. We found another paper from the National Institute of Health that showed that CBD prevents cytokine storms. And there is something magical about the combination and fusion of the bee cappy with the CBD that we have received reports like I never imagined that we would receive. Everything from people with Parkinson's to, there's two of my favorite stories, and these both have to do with near death or hospice type situations. In two different cases, one person's grandmother was in hospice and she was letting go and she was ready to leave. And he started giving her Ayalife every day for about 4 or 5 days. 4 or 5 days later, he comes to go visit her in hospice and she's up playing cards with the nurses and she's laughing and she's back to life. And when he wrote, I could tell the emotion in the email because he got more time with his grandmother where he thought that he wouldn't have time. Now, she was in hospice. She was dying. She wound up passing away about a month later, but it revived her to the point to where she was able to spend a little more quality time with him, and he was able to spend more quality time with her. And it was such a beautiful experience because, at the end of your life, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how many things you've accumulated. You don't want anything except for more time. And to be able to get those precious moments like that. I remember when my mother passed away, she had a stroke. And once she had a stroke, that's it, she was gone. But it took 2 months for her to pass away after that. But she had left when she had that stroke. I didn't have that time, and I would have done anything to have just a little bit more time to talk to her, just a little bit more. Another one, very same situation. The grandmother, she wasn't in a hospice situation, but she was winding down, and she didn't want to do anything anymore. and started taking life. All of a sudden, grandma's back out gardening and living life again. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that this is what people are reporting here. Another client wrote about their cat, 17 years old, started giving him life, started playing around like a kitten again. There's something magical about this, I think, for two reasons. Because number one, when we make the life, we do the same ritual as we do when we make the ayahuasca. We see it as a sacred brew, just like the ayahuasca. But also we infuse it with a positive energy. We infuse it with the same energy that we do when we make the ayahuasca brew itself. We show it the same amount of respect, the same amount of love. And I think it's ethereal, spiritual, and physical at the same time. And if I can share one more story with you real quick before we change gears, my favorite review that we've ever gotten was of somebody who wrote about 3 days later after receiving their order. They ordered 6 bottles, and they said, I love you, Chris and Cherie. Your show is awesome. This life just simply isn't working for me, though. So I'd like to return the rest of the bottles if that's okay. And Cherie had a little bit of a situation. We didn't get a chance to get to her email, but then she wound up writing back about 4 days later before we even had a chance to answer the first email. And she said, I changed my mind. I continued using it, and I actually started to feel the effects, and I've never felt as good as I'm feeling now. I feel my pain going away. Everything is working. I'm absolutely amazed. I just needed to give it a little bit of time to work because it's a cumulative effect. So to me, that was such a powerful review because it's not a mind over matter kind of deal. It's not, I'm taking something, I think it's going to work and it's going to work. She thought that it wasn't going to work, but she continued to take it, wrote back, and has ordered like 5 more times and started giving it out to a lot of her friends and family and things like that. Life has grown so much. And it's all because of word of mouth, because it's worked so well with people. So if you're not interested in the blasting off into hyperspace, if you've got to take a drug test and you can't test positive for THC, if you can benefit from CBD, but it tastes like garbage, you can get Life, ayalife.com, and we have a buy one get one free coupon. So you go to the single cart, you do 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, however many you want, just multiples of 2, and the single bottles only. So we'll put 2 in our cart, and then you go and go to the checkout, and you put in the code here, BTV Tribe, just like our Patreon, patreon.com/BTV Tribe. You type in BTV Tribe and hit apply, and you will get buy one, get one free. And we ship worldwide. And on our worldwide shipping, we ship with special labels that only say Life and other ingredients, but it's still the same Life. So we haven't had any issues with customs or anything like that. The only thing is, with this whole zombie virus situation, some of the posting has been slow, so that's the only thing we don't have any control over. But we have a lot of customers in Australia, we have a lot of customers in England, we have a lot of customers in France, a lot of customers in Canada, and a lot of customers here in the United States. So if you're looking for a healing method, I highly recommend this. Now I'm going to take a quick break, and on the other side, I'm going to get into the brewing technique of the ayahuasca and how you can get a brew that is, number one, very, very, very condensed, but number two, that doesn't taste bad at all. That's very easy to take. And as if you noticed in the very first video that I played of the toast in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, when we did our ayahuasca ritual there, I think I have it right here. I suck on an orange. And see, when we were in Egypt, we had to brew fast. We didn't have the opportunity to filter it out the way that we do at home. but biting on an orange neutralizes the taste completely. So it doesn't taste horrible like it does down in the Amazon. So I'm going to show you those tricks right on the other side. And in the meantime, I guess I'll just go ahead and play you this track since this track is already up here. This one is called The Ibis Has Returned. This is for all of the BTV family out there. We have done something historical today. Love ya. Alright, can we get Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Gio coming to you from way beyond the veil. We're here. We just wanted to show you the descent now as we're descending to the King's Chamber. From the King's Chamber back down to the land of mortals. Anyway, so they're pressing us. We're
really gotta get out of here.
We're not only beyond the veil, but we're also beyond our time too. So love you.
Yes,
And
love you
we'll
guys.
make more updates here soon. From the King's Chamber. Lucifer in the house. Always a pleasure to see you. Always sending love and light. I love it. So yeah, that was in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. Very interesting experiences. But I want to shift the focus here. Mrs. Gio actually might be joining us here. I was hoping that this wouldn't be as long as it is, but I felt like, if people are going to take it upon themselves to make their own ayahuasca, they need to be as informed as possible to be able to properly journey within and do so without any external influence, just you one-on-one with the plants. So let's jump back into it.
My dear traveler, the purpose of raw consciousness is never to destroy. It is always to create. Build bridges. Create happiness. And bring forth new life. We must live in the hope that mankind will draw together, and that we better understand each other. The more that we awaken, the easier this will become. Now rise. Follow your conductors, and fear no danger, as you step beyond the veil.
last couple weeks have been really fantastic for me overall. Energy-wise, I feel like my energy levels have just been so much better than usual. And the last couple of days, though, it feels like my stomach has been responding to all the great food we've been eating lately. Do I need to move my chair or the camera?
No, you're good.
Okay. And so for the last couple of days, my stomach's just been swollen. Haven't been having any other problems or anything like that. But Chris had the idea a few days ago, why don't you, up your dose of life a little bit? And I was like, that's not a terrible idea. So I started taking a little bit more than I usually take. And last night, I slept really, really well. It makes me sleep really well. And when I woke up just now, how much inflammation is in my stomach now?
It's about 1/4 of what there was.
Exactly.
I
just
was on
this
the
afternoon.
phone yesterday. So Cherie has a few issues that she needs surgically repaired. And I was on the phone with the doctor because they have to do one more set of tests, and April 21st is the next date.
Yeah, where they test
and I was on the phone with
bladder.
the doctor, telling the doctor's assistant she can't last that long. She needs a surgery like yesterday, and having this test holding her up. I mean, we're looking at April 21st and then getting surgery scheduled in May.
That's probably
and
May.
Then, maybe getting it in June. I mean, this is too long.
Yeah.
And I said, just take a mega dose of Life. Do that for a couple times. And when you just walked in here just now, I was amazed at how
At the
your stomach
transformation.
has. Yeah, it's not as swollen, not nearly as swollen. I was worried. I was like, almost crying on the phone.
Yeah, I know.
And to
He
see
was
the
really
relief
worried
that
about
you've
me.
got now, you have to get this fixed. But this is fighting off the inflammation.
This is
so well.
This is a really, really, really good example of iLife working for something that's not. It's not curable through. It's not something you can wish away. It's not something you can will away, and it's also not something that you can treat with purely natural, organic, holistic means. I wish it was. I really, really wish it was. But
no, I mean, when the insides need to be moved,
to be repaired,
back in place,
and physically relocated.
There's no amount
a
of
little bit
energy
different.
work or
Yeah.
anything that's going to fix that.
Trust me, we've tried. We really have tried. But the energy work.
We did manifest some great things, though.
We have manifested some really good things.
Forgive us for being redundant, but really quick, I'm just going to say real quick. I had metastatic disease in an MRI, and I said, no, I am not going to accept cancer in my life.
That's just not going to be my
after
reality.
several tests, they said, it was a misreading of the MRI. With what you have going on in your stomach, with the tumor that you have there, they did 4 biopsies, and they all came back negative.
Yeah,
and
they're sure that there is something.
I am really confident that it was a combination of the Life and a combination of that we are not going to accept that reality into our existence.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's why the ayahuasca healing is so powerful itself, not just the Life, but the ayahuasca healing, because it allows you to see the code. It allows you to see the energy. And once you see the energy in the code, then you have a better understanding of what your light body is like.
Right.
You also have a better understanding of what your physical body is like. And then as you start to progress through this journey, you start to learn, basically you become a code worker. And the shaman and natives used to just call it energy.
Yeah.
But we have a better lexicon now, and we can refer to it as code. And so we're just changing code.
As a programmer, a computer programmer changes the code on a computer program. It's almost no different at all. Another thing I wanted to point out was that the ingredient in iLife that we are discussing on this broadcast, I think it made it an experience. Actually, I think I got enough of the be happy to where I was really sleeping a long time. And I think that was partly what was worrying you a little bit, because I was really sleeping. But while I was sleeping, I was having very intense dreams, and it was almost as if I was having an ayahuasca experience, just very, very mild.
That's funny. I was just speaking to Rock Castaldo earlier tonight, and he said that ever since he started taking the Aya Life, his dreams have been so vivid.
Extremely vivid dreams.
Vivid, yeah.
And that's partly the reason why you would come and try to wake me up, and I might wake up for an hour or two to eat, take care of my body and everything, and then I would eventually, just start feeling tired again and go back to sleep. And this is while I was mega dosing to try to get this inflammation in my abdomen down. And so I attribute, the physical to the physical, but I'm definitely attributing the glow that I feel right now to the ayahuasca mind.
You look
Absolutely,
beautiful.
100%.
Let's get into this because I wanted to keep this video short.
Okay, yes, please.
But I do want to go into
I just
some
want to be a
Patreon content.
living example.
But
Yeah.
for the sake of inclusion, I want to finish up with what I was saying about
Yes, please.
brewing the ayahuasca. And then, as I said before, on our Patreon, patreon.com/BTV Tribe, we will be brewing a batch here in the next couple days, and we will film it. That way our Patreons can actually see the process and what goes into it. But as I said, if you go to the description and send an email to the email that's in the description, you'll get an automatic reply with a link to the Giawaska healing recipe. Now, I wrote this about 7 years ago, so there was a lot more, incantations and, things like that back then. A lot more what I would consider fluff these days, things that aren't necessarily necessary. But again, it's important to develop your own rituals out there. And so we don't go as heavy as we used to with the sage and with the incantations and with all of that. But we've developed we haven't developed tools. We have found tools to make the brewing process so much more efficient. So the ayahuasca guide goes into a lot of things that I talked about. It discusses MAOIs, DMT, Syrian rue. Another warning about Syrian rue that I forgot completely about is in ancient cultures, they used to use Syrian rue to provoke miscarriages. So you do not want to take Syrian rue if you're pregnant. That's something I should have said before. But we get into
it's an abortifacient.
diet, and the thing about diet is whenever you purge, you're going to purge whatever you've eaten. But what I found in my experiences, and maybe this isn't something you want to do right off the bat, but we recommend a plant-based diet for about 2 to 14 days. Realistically, as long as you're fasting for about 8 hours, you can eat breakfast in the morning and then drink ayahuasca that night. Your stomach is going to be empty. That's the point, is to have an empty stomach. But when we get to the actual brewing process itself, what we use these, I thought I had them all on here on the screen, but I don't. Stainless steel pots. So we have a series of these stainless steel pots here. You can pick them up at Walmart or anywhere else, and they're like $8 a piece, and they're huge. And we usually use about 3 of them, and we fill them up with water to about right around where the little bolts are, right there, and then you would take your bark. And what I always recommend is to do about 100 grams of acacia or mimosa. And when I put the Giawaska guide out several years ago, it was ridiculed. Oh, these are way too high doses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But people have been reporting that they've tried other recipes. It didn't work for them, and the Giawaska does. But the reason that you put in 100 grams is not because you necessarily want to take that 100 grams, especially during your first experiences, but it's because you want to have extra doses for if you purge, and if you want to go deeper. You want to have more. You want to have too much than to have too little. Because like I said, there's nothing worse than going through all of this process and then coming to a point where you're like, oh man, it's not even working for me. So we fill it up to about there. I think in the guidebook it says about 3 gallons of distilled water, and we put 1 gallon of water in each one. And we'll put our plant material in there. However, what you want to do is you want to adjust the pH of the water. And there's several ways you can adjust it. You can adjust it with vinegar. You can adjust it with lemon juice. What I prefer to adjust it with is 1,000 milligrams strength of liquid vitamin C. And I'll pull up a picture here so you can see it. So this right here works wonderful for bringing that pH to that level that you want it at. And so what I do is I start out with a tablespoon or a teaspoon, put it in the water, mix it up, and then I will use a digital pH meter and check the pH, which is something that they don't do in the Amazon. I don't even know if they do anything to change the pH of the Amazon. But the proper pH is important, because if you're hitting the proper pH every time and the proper temperature, you're going to get a consistent brew every single time you brew. The only factor is the potency of the bark that you're working with. I got a batch of bad bark that was just inactive, and I tried it, and there was nothing in it, and I bought a large quantity. But luckily, the seller said, go ahead and send it back to me. No problem at all. I'll send you a whole new batch. I had already used 1 kilo of it, because when we brew, we usually use like 500 grams or 1 kilo. We make a lot, so we can have a lot left over. But I sent it back to him, and he sent it back. He sent me a whole brand new order back, even whatever I used before. So, that kind of customer service I really respect, and I wish I can plug the website. Do you think it's okay to plug the website?
Yeah, I think it's okay.
I just don't want people to put, I don't want to get in that legal gray area where I'm doing a recipe and then at the same time telling people where to get
don't cross
supplies.
That line. Yeah, I wouldn't even go anywhere near that line.
It's probably a better idea to not do that. So this is all hypothetical,
we'll
of course.
Do it somewhere else.
You don't want to do it. Yeah, you don't want to do it
in another venue.
When you're, we'll put it in the Patreon video.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So the pH levels that we're shooting for, if I remember off the top of my head, I think it's around 3.5.
Yes. Actually, I would say more about 3.8.
Yeah, here it is, 3.8 to 3.5.
Yeah, 3.8. It feels better on the kidneys than 3.5.
If it's too acidic, it's going to be bitter.
Yeah.
And especially when you start condensing it down, it's going to be really bitter and it's going to be hard to drink. But if you hit that pH right around 3.5 to 3.8, you are acidifying the water enough to be able to pull the molecules out. But at the same time, you're not...
you're not making it too acidic for your body to be able to tolerate.
Another super chat. I'm drinking ayahuasca tonight with Two Birds Church in Texas. Awesome. Have a wonderful, wonderful experience tonight. And please let us know how your experience goes. I would love for you to call into the next show and share your experience. That's awesome. That's awesome. So let me go through this real quick. So I'll add a tablespoon of liquid vitamin C and get the pH to about 3.8, 3.5. If it goes to like 3, then you add some more water. If it's not quite at 3.5 or 3.8, you can add more vitamin C. So you can adjust the pH level like that. But a digital pH meter makes all the difference when hitting that perfect pH level. Taking it a step further, what we've done, and this may seem blasphemous to some, but
It's not blasphemous.
In my opinion, we're talking about neo-shamanism.
Yeah,
here.
this is neo-shamanism.
We're not talking about, being in the Amazon covered in dirt, getting bitten by bugs, and just guessing at what we're doing. We're trying to get things down to a science. So what we've done is we found Bluetooth thermometers. And the reason that it's Bluetooth thermometers is food thermometers is because we can put this on the we can put this inside of the water, and you want to take the water up to about 200 to 212 degrees. If it goes over that 212 and it starts to get to a roaring boil, you're actually destroying the molecule. But you can set the thermometer. You can walk away from the brew, and it will notify you on the phone if your brew's getting too hot, and then you can go and address it rather than having to sit there and babysit it. Remember the first couple of years we were sitting down and we were babysitting them, and it was just we'd have to get up and check. And, we're not going to sit there for the entire time, because every extraction in one of these pots, every time we fill up a pot with water and put our plant material in there, we brew that for 3 to 4 hours, and we repeat that 3 times. So, you're not going to stand there for 3 or 4 hours, but we are going to get up every 20 to 30 minutes, stir it up a little bit, check it. But there's been times when we walked away, came back, and found it in a roaring boil. And there's even been times when the water has evaporated so much because we have it so hot that it's evaporating and it gets all the way down, and we've pretty much ruined it. I have heard of people scraping the tar. Edie Frexco was talking about scraping the tar from the bottom and making little tar balls, but we've never tried that. However, the digital or the Bluetooth thermometer will notify you, so you can go immediately to the brew and adjust it. And likewise, you want to make sure that if you want to do a minimum of 3 hours extraction, and if you notice that the water is evaporating quicker, then you want to add more water to that, because you want to have that 3 to 4 hour time, sometimes even 5 hours. Then what you do at that point is there was a glove that we were using. I don't remember what this glove is, but it's a very thick rubber glove, and it came with this. It was a thing to extract cannabis oil. Do you remember what that product was called?
Magic butter machine.
Magic butter machine. Okay, magic butter machine. And then there's a glove that comes with it. So here it is, the original green love glove by the Magic Butter Machine. This is a very, very, very thick green glove. It doesn't have to be green. This happens to be, one that we use, but I'm sure you can find any glove that's just as thick. You can find it here for like $16. And so what we do is, once we have that 3 to 4 hour extraction process, whether we have to add more water or not to it, we'll take whatever's left over, use another pot, and then put a white t-shirt around it. Then we'll take it and we'll slowly pour it through that white t-shirt and grab all the plant matter in the white t-shirt that's on top of the pot. Then we do it again in another pot. We fill it up, repeat the process again with the same plant matter. Now, at this point, you can either take your original pot and start to simmer it down, or you can just leave it all for the end. We usually just leave it all for the end, just so we don't have to watch 2 different things at the same time. Because if you're simmering down your first pull and you simmer it down too long and you forget about it, it's gone. That's it. You've pretty much wasted that whole first pull, and the first pull is going to get the most out of it. So we just take it and we set it to the side. We take the plant matter again, and we use this magic glove to squeeze out all the juice from that plant matter once it's inside of that white t-shirt. Now, a lot of people have commented and said, sometimes white t-shirts have dyes, things like that. That very well might be the case. However, cheesecloths are simply too thin, and coffee filters are too thick. So white t-shirts is what we found to be the absolute best to use.
And the best economical option.
Economical too. Yeah, you can get them for like $1 or $2.
Yeah.
And we never wash them. We just use them and throw them away. And yeah, I don't know if that's good or bad because, they probably wash them at the factory or there's, dyes and things like that. But we're talking about white t-shirts that usually aren't dyed.
This is what I usually do is, regardless of what's happened with that cotton, I wash it in just hot water, no soap, no bleach, no nothing else, just very, very, very hot water twice and dry it in the dryer, no dryer sheets or anything like that, nothing to make it smell good. What you're doing basically is just using hot water to rinse out any bleach that might be left behind on the white t-shirt. Sometimes they bleach the fabric, or any kind of bacteria and stuff that's on the t-shirts. That gets rid of that too. It feels like cleaner, and then once you use it once, I throw it away after that, unless sometimes I'll rinse them in hot water and then dry without
rinsing and drying and rinsing and drying. There's no problem with that.
Is fine,
you just have to worry about like bacteria and stuff like that. But realistically, you're simmering everything.
You're simmering everything down
killing
anyway.
Any kind of bacteria, anything like that anyways.
Right.
And I'm not really that big of a stickler for if I have a little bit of dye in there for a t-shirt or, I'm not hyper concerned about that.
Especially after going to Egypt,
Yeah. Oh, in Egypt, we'll show you some videos in the Patreon.
We'll do that later, but
in the Patreon,
getting back to what you were saying, I'm sorry to interrupt.
So we repeat that process 3 times. So we've taken the plant matter out, we've set it aside in a pot, taken the same plant matter, redone the process again for 3 to 4 hours, set it aside, repeat that process one more time, set that aside. Then we remove all the plant matter and we combine it all into one pot. From this point, you're going to have about 1 to 2 gallons of liquid, and that's way too much to drink. So you want to start simmering that down and simmering that down. And again, this is where the pH meter comes in the most important. The thermometer comes in most important, because the slower you simmer it, the better it is, in my opinion. If you can simmer it at 200 degrees, it's going to take longer to simmer down, but there's less likely of destroying any molecule. Going up to 212, there's more likely that it's going to destroy some molecule, but it's not a problem. If you have a roaring boil, you're going to probably destroy the potency of that brew. So you don't want to do that. But I would set it at about 210. I think 210 is a good place, or 205. And that way it gives you a little bit of room. If it starts going off, you have a little bit of room to get there and turn the fire down a little bit. So you start to simmer it down, and when you simmer it all the way down, you're left with about a mason jar full of liquid, and that's it. And that's 100 grams of mimosa or acacia in one mason jar. Now, what I usually do at that point is I will take the mason jar. Illuminati confirmed, by the way. Because it's a mason jar.
Of course.
I'll take the mason jar and I will repeat the process 2 or 3 more times with the white t-shirt, switching it from one mason jar to another, to get as much sediment out as possible. Then you can either drink it that night, or if you want to take it a step further, which is what we usually do, we'll take the mason jar and we'll put it in the refrigerator. We'll leave that overnight. What happens when you put it in overnight is you'll notice that any leftover sediment, anything like that, all starts gathering at the bottom. And especially leaving it in the refrigerator overnight, you'll find about that much sediment in the bottom of that mason jar. So then you take that and you transfer all that liquid from the mason jar into another mason jar, leaving all that sediment behind. The more sediment in the brew, the more you're going to throw up, the harder it is to drink, the harder it is it's going to be to hold down during that first initial 20-30 minutes while you're waiting for your stomach to absorb it all. So this is why it's so important to filter it down as much as possible. And we'll repeat this process a couple times sometimes. Sometimes we will brew on a Monday and we're not drinking until Friday or Saturday. Because what we're doing throughout the week is we're repeating this process of leaving it in the refrigerator overnight, redoing it again through a white t-shirt, putting it back in the refrigerator, and you'll be surprised. You can repeat this process 4 or 5 times and still find sediment constantly falling to the bottom. However, after you've put enough love and dedication into the brew, it will come out with about a cup of liquid, about 8 ounces of liquid by the time you're done with it, after you've removed sediment and done all of that. That 8 cups of liquid, 8 ounces of liquid, now every ounce has 12 milligrams of DMT, which if you look on any recipe out there, it'll tell you take 12 to 15 grams and do this process all with 12 to 15 grams and then come out with your final dose. But if you do it the Giawaska way, now you have 8 12 milligram doses at your disposal, and you can fit them in a shot glass or less than a shot glass, and they taste almost tasteless, especially if you've repeated this process several times. And I'll usually take 2 up front, or I'll take 1 and then purge and then take another 2 after that. If you have 2 people, I would recommend using 200 grams of bark. That way you have 16 total 1 ounce doses. That's it. All you have to drink is 1 ounce of liquid. It goes down so easy, and then it does leave a little bit of a bitter taste as it goes down, which is why you saw me in that video in the Great Pyramid biting on an orange. Because you drink it, you bite on an orange, it neutralizes all of that. We have been using this method for years and years and years and years, and we have had consistent, powerful brews that are almost completely and totally tasteless and very, very powerful. When we were in Egypt, we had to rush.
Extremely strong.
We did 3-hour extraction, 3-hour extraction, 3-hour extraction, filter. We didn't even get a chance to do it, the overnight thing. I think we did the overnight thing one night. But we drank a much, much, much dirtier brew. Yeah,
but we had to drink a lot more of it as a result.
Yeah. We had to drink a lot more, and there was more liquid to take down.
That's what I mean.
But in that one, we did a kilo. We did a brew with a kilo, and I drank about half of it because we had 1 kilo for the Temple of Isis and for the Great Pyramid, and we drank some of it in the Temple of Isis, and then I drank the majority of it at the Great Pyramid, and I wound up drinking probably 400 grams of Mimosa hostilis, which is a mega dose. I would not recommend that anybody does it. It's actually past the overdose threshold for DMT. There's an LD50 on there. I did throw up the first little bit, and so I don't know how much actually got into my stomach, but it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. There was no way that I was going to undershoot this. I would have rather overshot it than undershot it because there was no second chances when it came to this. But for starting out, 100 grams, you have 8 doses, and then that way you can choose how deep you want to go. You can take just 1, and if you hold it in long enough, you'll go into an experience. Or if you're just doing it for the first time, you do 1, you get into the experience and go, oh, this is actually a very beautiful, lovely place. This is a wonderful place. This is a gorgeous place. There's beauty here. There's love. I want to go deeper. And so you have the option to take another one, and to take another one, and to take another one. So that is our 13 years of trial and error and scientifically breaking this down to a science on how to get very powerful brews consistently every single time with a minimal amount of materials. And I think 100 grams of acacia costs about $15. So you're getting 8 doses out of that. So you're paying about $2 a dose.
Right. Exactly.
Whereas you go down to the Amazon, you're getting probably 10 to 15 milligrams tops in the brew, and you're paying $2,000. Now, of course, it comes with accommodations and everything else like that. But in my opinion, there should be nothing stopping you. And when we started this, we didn't have the means to go to the Amazon. If I had waited to go to the Amazon, I don't think I would have ever drank ayahuasca.
Yeah, it just never would have happened.
Yeah. And my plans were to wait and go to the Amazon. But I just, because of Joe Rogan, I took it upon myself to just say, hey, I'm going to do this. And
I don't think it was Joe Rogan. I think it was your higher self saying, what the hell's wrong with you? You don't need a shaman to tell you who you are. You have everything already inside of you. All that power, all that energy, all of that wisdom is already inside of you. You just need to unlock it. And it was your higher self that just happened to listen to the words and really listen to the words when someone else said, do it yourself.
Yeah. There was a spark for sure.
Become the person that you...
# become your own shaman. And the ayahuasca retreats hate us for that.
They really do.
They write articles about how dangerous it is. It was funny. There was this one kid, he was a white guy on top of that. And he was telling me that I don't have a right to brew ayahuasca. And I'm like, I come from a lineage of shaman.
Yes.
I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. But he was down in the Amazon. And, I after experiencing myself, I can tell you from my experience that it's not as sacred and special as everybody's making it out to be. It's a tool for everybody. I think it's the UDV that their motto is for us, not them, or something along those lines. And I'm like, no, this is for everybody. But then again, there is the flip side of the coin, and I just want to leave everybody with this before we switch over to the Patreon section. You have to have control of your own consciousness in reality before you start stepping into these other realms. So you have to use your own discernment. You have to use your own judgment. I can't tell you if ayahuasca is right for you. You're the only one that can determine that. And you really have to meditate and think, is this something that is going to benefit me? Or is this something that I could have a bad experience because I don't have good experiences in a normal state of consciousness? Because it's going to bring out what is inside you. If you have mental issues, with all due respect, those mental issues are going to come out in these experiences. And I've had callers calling in who have said that they've had horrible experiences and they have a history of mental illness. One of my best friends here in Las Vegas, his sister is legit 100% schizophrenic. His mother is legit 100% schizophrenic. And he knows not to take psychedelics, DMT, ayahuasca instinctively. And when he told me this, I said, because I was trying